The emergency broadcast screamed across 17 star systems at once. Station Master Kellis pressed his thin, trembling fingers against the communication panel, watching the red warning lights blink faster and faster. Behind him, through the viewing port, he could see them coming. The creche. Thousands of biomechanical nightmares, crawling across the darkness of space like insects swarming toward dying prey. "This is Ventari Refugee Station 7 Alpha." Kelly spoke into the transmitter, his voice cracking. "We have 40,000 civilians, families, children. The creche are 3 days away. We need immediate evacuation. Please, anyone listening, we need help." 300 light-years away in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, the message played on repeat. 12 species sat in their designated seats, floating platforms arranged in a perfect circle. They were the civilized races, the enlightened ones, the ones who had moved beyond violence and war. Ambassador Threen of the Qualix bobbed his gelatinous body. "We must send the Fleet of Peace immediately. The Fleet of Peace is currently assigned to the Delian trade negotiations," Ambassador Vorix countered, her feathers ruffling with irritation. "We cannot simply redirect Council resources without proper authorization. There are 40,000 lives at stake," Threen protested. "Then we follow protocol," Vorix said firmly. "We file an emergency motion. We debate the allocation of resources. We vote. We do this properly, as civilized beings do." The debate continued. Hours became days. Forms were filed. Subcommittees were formed. The bureaucracy of peace ground forward at its usual pace. In a smaller, less decorated corner of the same station, Ambassador Chen of Earth listened to the same distress call. She was new to the Council, representing a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel. The other ambassadors still looked at her with barely hidden disgust. "Humans came from a death world," they said. "A horrible planet with crushing gravity, lethal weather, and predators that hunted in packs." Chen stood up from her seat and walked out of the council chamber. Her assistant Marcus hurried after her. "Ambassador, where are you going?" "To send a message to Earth," Chen said. "The Ventari need help. The Council is going to debate this for weeks." "Those people don't have weeks. But the Council specifically said we should not interfere with established protocols," Marcus reminded her. Chen stopped and turned to face him. "Marcus, there are children on that station. If we wait for the Council, they'll all be dead. What would you do?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "I'll start preparing the emergency channels." The message reached Earth within hours. Fleet Admiral Rodriguez read it 3 times, then walked to the command center. "Get me the closest battle group," he ordered. "Sir, the 7th Fleet is finishing exercises near the Epsilon sector. They could be there in 72 hours. Tell Captain Santos she has a new mission. Full battle group, combat ready. We're going to get those people out." "Sir, the Council has not authorized military intervention." Rodriguez looked at his communications officer with cold eyes. "The Council can file a complaint later. Those people are asking for help right now. We're going. 12 ships prepared for immediate departure. Not the peaceful transport vessels the Ventari expected. Not unarmed medical ships with diplomatic envoys. Battle cruisers, destroyers, ships designed for war, crewed by humans who had spent their entire evolution learning to hunt, to fight, to survive on a world that tried to kill them every single day." Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the UNSC Indomitable, watching her crew work. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking weapon systems, verifying shield generators, loading ammunition that other species considered barbarically primitive. Humans still use kinetic weapons, actual metal projectiles fired at incredible speeds. Most civilized species found it horrifying. "Captain, all ships report ready," her first officer said. "Then let's go get them," Santos replied. "All ships jump on my mark." 3, 2, 1 mark. Space twisted. Reality bent. 12 human warships vanished from normal space, racing through the faster-than-light corridor toward the Ventari station. Back on the refugee station, Kellis received a response. His hearts lifted with hope. Someone had answered. Someone was coming. "Refugee Station 7 Alpha, this is the Galactic Council. Your request has been logged. A fleet of peace will be dispatched once proper authorization is obtained. Estimated arrival time 21 days. Please remain calm and follow all established evacuation protocols." 21 days. The creche would arrive in 3. Kelly slumped in his chair. They were all going to die. A young Ventari child named Pip tugged on her mother's robe. "Mama, are the peace ships coming?" Her mother pulled her close, trying to hide her own fear. "Yes, little one. The ships are coming," but she knew the truth. Everyone on the station knew. The ships would arrive too late. There would be nothing left to save. 3 days later, alarms blared across the station. Ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Kellis rushed to the sensors, hoping against hope that somehow the Council had moved faster than expected. His breath caught in his throat. 12 ships, massive, angular, covered in armor plating and weapon emplacements. They moved with predatory grace, spreading into a defensive formation around the station. These were not peaceful transports. These were warships. Are those the Kresh? Someone whispered. Kellis checked the identification transponders. His hand shook as he read the results. "No," he said quietly. "They're human." Terror spread through the station. The Deathworlders had come. The violent, aggressive species from the horrible gravity world. Stories about humans were told across the galaxy. How they hunted their own food. How they kept predators as pets. How their planet had shaped them into natural killers. And now they were here. A communication signal came through. Kellis almost didn't want to answer it, but he had no choice. Refugee Station 7 Alpha. This is Captain Maria Santos of the United Nations Space Command vessel Indomitable. We received your distress call. We're here for the rescue operation. Prepare for combat extraction. Combat extraction, not peaceful evacuation. Combat, Captain Santos, Kellis stammered. We have 40,000 civilians here. Combat will doom us all. There was a pause. Then the human captain's voice came back, calm and steady. Station Master, we didn't come all this way to watch. We came to get everyone out alive, all of them. Now lock down your exterior hatches and get everyone to the central sectors. We've got work to do. The communication ended. Kelly stared at the view screen, watching the human ships move into position. Outside, in the darkness, the Kresh continued their approach. And the humans waited, weapons armed, ready for war. The first human shuttle docked with Refugee Station 7 Alpha 6 hours after their arrival. Kellis watched through the security cameras as the airlock cycled open. He expected diplomats, maybe scientists, perhaps medical personnel in clean white uniforms. Instead, 10 humans emerged in full combat armor. They were terrifying. Each one stood nearly 2 meters tall, enhanced by their armored suits. They moved with a fluid grace that seemed wrong for being so heavily equipped. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors. Weapons hung from magnetic clips on their suits, real physical weapons that fired metal and explosives. The refugees scattered, pressing themselves against walls, trying to get away from the armored figures. Parents grabbed their children. The elderly froze in fear. These were the Deathworlders, the predators from the Nightmare Planet. One of the humans removed her helmet. A woman with dark skin and kind eyes looked around at the terrified crowd. She smiled gently. "Hello, everyone. My name is Sergeant Chen. We're here to help. I know we look scary, but I promise we're the good guys." She spoke in perfect galactic standard. Though her accent was strange to Ventari ears, a small voice piped up. "You have teeth like a predator." Chen looked down to see Pip, the young Ventari child, staring up at her with wide eyes. Chen knelt down, bringing herself to the child's level. "We do have sharp teeth," Chen admitted. "On Earth, our world, we had to be strong to survive. But we use that strength to protect others now. Do you know what my favorite thing is?" Pip shook her head. "Keeping people safe. Especially brave kids like you." "What's your name?" "Pip." "Well, Pip, I'm going to make sure you and everyone here get somewhere safe." "That's a promise." Kellis approached cautiously. "Sergeant Chen, the Kresh will be here in less than 2 days. We have 40,000 people to evacuate." "Even with your ships, Station Master Kellis," Chen interrupted gently. "With respect, we didn't come here to evacuate. We came here to rescue." "There's a difference. Evacuation means running away. Rescue means we're taking everyone to safety and nothing is going to stop us." Before Kellis could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. The Kresh had detected the human presence. They were accelerating their approach. The first wave would arrive in hours, not days. Chen's helmet was back on in seconds. "All teams, defensive positions. Looks like they want to start early. Let's show them why that was a mistake." The human ships moved with startling speed. Point defense weapons activated. Shields came online. The 12 vessels formed a protective sphere around the station, each one covering specific approach vectors. Kellis watched from the command center as the crash wave approached. 5,000 biomechanical creatures, each one the size of a small shuttle. They had destroyed entire fleets before. The galaxy feared the crash because they were relentless, adaptable, and nearly impossible to kill. The creatures entered weapons range. The human ships opened fire. The space around the station lit up like a star going nova. Thousands of rounds per second poured from the human vessels. Not elegant energy weapons, not sophisticated particle beams. Simple, brutal kinetic projectiles traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The effect was devastating. The first wave of crash didn't stand a chance. They were shredded, torn apart by the sheer volume of fire. Explosions blossomed in the vacuum. In less than 30 seconds, 5,000 Kresh were reduced to debris. Impossible, Kellis whispered. That's impossible. On the human command channel, Captain Santos's voice was calm. First wave eliminated. Stay alert. They'll adapt and send something heavier. She was right. The Kresh changed tactics. They sent their heavy assault forms, creatures with thick armor plating designed to withstand sustained fire. These were the monsters that had cracked battleship hulls. The humans changed tactics too. All ships switched to armor-piercing rounds. Let's see how tough they really are. The second engagement was longer, but the result was the same. The humans adapted faster than the Kresh. Every time the swarm tried a new approach, the human ships countered. They moved like they were dancing, each vessel covering the others, creating overlapping fields of fire that left no gaps. Inside the station, Sergeant Chen was organizing the evacuation. But not the way Kellis expected. We're taking everyone, Chen explained. The sick, the elderly, everyone. No one gets left behind. But the transport capacity, Kellis started, is enough. We brought military transports. They're not comfortable, but they're safe. We'll pack people in tight if we have to. What about the Kresh? If they breach the station, then we stop them. Chen said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. Station Master, we have Marines positioned at every critical junction. If the Kresh get through our ships, they'll have to go through us. And humans are really, really good at close combat. As if summoning them with her words, the station shuddered. A Kresh boarding pod had latched onto the outer hull. It was burning through. Chen's team moved immediately. They set up a defensive position in the corridor leading to the breach point. Civilians were moved to safety behind heavy blast doors. Pip watched from a viewing window as the Kresh broke through. They were horrible. Twisted combinations of organic matter and machinery, all claws and cutting edges and weapons grafted onto living tissue. 6 of them poured into the corridor. The humans met them head-on. What happened next? Pip would remember for the rest of her life. The humans didn't flinch. They didn't retreat. They fought with a coordination that seemed impossible. They moved like they shared one mind, each Marine knowing exactly where the others were, what they were doing. Chen threw herself in front of a Kresh that had broken through the line, putting her armored body between it and a group of elderly Ventari. The creature's blade scraped across her armor, leaving a deep gouge. Chen barely seemed to notice. She fired her weapon at point-blank range, then used the gun itself as a club when the Kresh got too close. The fight lasted 90 seconds. All 6 Kresh were dead. The humans had taken hits, but they were all still standing. Chen walked back to the civilians, her armor scorched and dented. She was breathing hard, but she was smiling. See? Told you we were the good guys. Pip ran to her, wrapping her small arms around Chen's armored leg. You saved us. Chen patted her head gently. That's the job, kid. Captain Santos's voice came over the station's communication system. Station Master Kellis, this is Captain Santos. We've cleared the immediate area. Beginning evacuation procedures. We'll have everyone off the station in 18 hours. Kellis looked at his displays. The Kresh main force was still coming. Hundreds of thousands of them. Captain, the main swarm, we know. We'll handle it. Just get your people ready to move. Another transmission cut in. It was the Galactic Council. Human vessels, this is the Galactic Council fleet. We have arrived to manage this situation. You are ordered to cease aggressive operations immediately and turn over command to the Fleet of Peace. 3 ships had finally arrived, sleek, beautiful vessels with no weapons, just sensors and communication arrays and conference rooms. They had come 3 weeks too late with forms and protocols. Santos's response was brief. Negative, Council Fleet, we're in the middle of a rescue operation. Stay clear of the combat zone. You are violating established protocols. I'm saving lives. If you want to help, feel free. If not, stay out of our way." The Council ships maintained their distance, watching in shock as the violent Deathworlders did what the civilized galaxy could not. Kellis looked at Sergeant Chen, who was helping organize the civilian evacuation lines. She was still smiling, despite the damage to her armor, despite having just fought nightmare creatures in close combat. "Why do you do this?" Kellis asked. "You could have ignored our call. Your people barely know us." Chen looked at him with those kind eyes. "Because it's the right thing to do. Where we come from, we have a saying. No one left behind, we mean it. Every single one of you is getting off this station safely. That's not a hope. That's a fact." Outside, the human fleet regrouped, preparing for the main assault. Inside, humans in armor walked among terrified refugees, offering comfort and protection in equal measure. The Deathworlders had come, and somehow that made everyone feel safer. The evacuation was chaos, but it was organized chaos. Human Marines moved through the station in teams, guiding refugees to transport shuttles. They carried the injured. They helped the elderly. One massive Marine cradled 3 Ventari children in his arms, speaking softly to them as he walked toward safety. Dr. James Park worked in the station's medical bay, surrounded by wounded refugees. He had been working for 20 hours straight without rest. His hands moved with steady precision, treating injuries that ranged from minor cuts to critical trauma. Other species would have collapsed by now. Humans just kept going. A Ventari nurse named Tillich watched him in amazement. "Dr. Park, you need to rest." "Your body can handle it," Park said, not looking up from his patient. "I took a stim pack 6 hours ago. I'm good for another 12 hours at least." "A stim pack? That dose would kill most species." Park smiled tiredly. "Humans have a high tolerance for chemicals that would be poisonous to others. Comes from evolving on a death world where half the plants tried to kill us. How's the patient in Bay 3? "Stable, thanks to you." "Then let's keep them that way." Outside the station, the Kresh were adapting. They had learned that direct assault didn't work. Now they were trying something new. They sent smaller, faster units designed to slip through the human defensive perimeter and attack the evacuation shuttles. The humans adapted faster. Interceptor squadrons. "You're up," Santos ordered from the Indomitable's bridge. "Nothing gets through to those transports." 50 human fighter craft launched from the larger ships. They were small, agile, and piloted by humans who had spent their whole lives fighting gravity 3 times stronger than most inhabited worlds. Their reaction times were faster. Their bodies could handle accelerations that would make other species pass out. The Kresh interceptors met them in the void. Between the station and the human fleet, the human pilots hunted them like wolves hunting prey. They worked in coordinated packs, communicating with brief words and instinctive understanding. One fighter would draw the Kresh's attention, while 2 others struck from unexpected angles. It was a dance of death, and the humans had been practicing for millions of years of evolution. Pip watched from a viewing port as the battle unfolded. Sergeant Chen stood beside her, though she should have been resting after her earlier fight. "Why are you so good at fighting?" Pip asked quietly. Chen was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Our world was hard, Pip, really hard. We didn't start at the top of the food chain. We had to claw our way there. We learned to work together, to protect our pack, to never give up, and we learned that the strong should protect the weak. The Council says violence is wrong. Violence for its own sake is wrong." Chen agreed. "But violence to protect the innocent? That's different. That's justice." The Council forgot that peace isn't just the absence of fighting. It's the presence of safety. Real peace requires the strength to defend it. An alarm interrupted them. The Kresh were sending their heavy assault units. The galaxy had seen these creatures destroy entire battle groups. They were massive, heavily armored, and carried weapons that could crack a ship's hull. "Here we go," Chen said softly. The human fleet repositioned. Instead of maintaining their defensive sphere, they moved forward. "Toward the enemy. Are they attacking?" Kellis gasped from the command center. The Council fleet was broadcasting urgent warnings. "Human vessels, you are moving away from the defensive position. This violates all established combat doctrine. You must maintain defensive formation." Santos ignored them completely. "All ships, weapons free. Let's show them what happens when you threaten refugees." The human fleet hit the Kresh heavy units like a hammer. They didn't try to hold position and weather the assault. They charged forward, using their superior maneuverability to get inside the crash's effective range. At close quarters, the human ships were devastating, but the crash adapted again. They sent boarding parties toward the human ships themselves. If they could take control of even one vessel, it would break the human formation. 3 crash assault forms attached themselves to the Indomitable's hull. They began cutting through the armor plating. Santos watched the breach warnings appear on her screens. Marine teams, we have borders. Repel and eliminate. Inside the Indomitable, human Marines took position at the breach points. They had trained for this scenario 1,000 times. As the crash cut through the last layer of hull plating, the humans were waiting. The crash discovered something the galaxy was slowly learning. Humans were terrifying in space combat. They were absolutely nightmarish in close quarters. The Marines fought with a combination of modern weapons and ancient instincts. They used every advantage their evolution had given them: superior reaction speed, the ability to fight in multiple gravity levels, endurance that seemed impossible, and a pack mentality that meant each Marine trusted their teammates completely. The crash boarding parties lasted less than 5 minutes. Back on the refugee station, the evacuation continued. Humans moved through the corridors with refugees, keeping up a constant stream of calm chatter, keeping people moving, keeping them from panicking. They told jokes. They shared pictures of Earth. They treated this desperate evacuation like it was just another day at work. One Marine showed Pip a picture on his datapad. It was a small furry creature with big eyes. "This is my dog, Max," the Marine said. "He's waiting for me back home." "You keep a predator as a pet?" Pip asked, amazed. The Marine laughed. "Max wouldn't hurt anyone. He's a good boy. We've been partners with dogs for thousands of years. They helped us hunt. We gave them food and shelter. Now they're part of our families." It was a small moment, a brief conversation in the middle of a crisis, but it helped. Pip felt less afraid. 12 hours into the evacuation, disaster struck. A crash suicide unit got through the defensive perimeter. It was heading straight for one of the transport shuttles packed with refugees, Dr. Park's shuttle. The transport couldn't maneuver in time. The pilot was screaming warnings. The crash was going to ram them. A human interceptor pilot named Lieutenant Sarah Chen saw what was happening. She had maybe 2 seconds to decide. Her fighter couldn't destroy the crash unit in time, but she could get between them. She pushed her engines to maximum, throwing her small craft directly into the path of the crash. Her fighter collided with the enemy, and both exploded in a brief flash of light. The transport shuttle survived. 300 refugees, including Dr. Park, lived. Lieutenant Chen did not. On the Indomitable's bridge, Santos closed her eyes briefly. Then she opened them and continued directing the battle. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, there were people to save. The evacuation continued. More transports launched, each one carrying hundreds of refugees to safety. The human fleet maintained its aggressive defense, keeping the crash at bay through sheer determination and superior tactics. In the medical bay, Dr. Park learned what Lieutenant Chen had done. He stood for a moment processing the news. Then he went back to work. He would work for another 10 hours, saving lives, pushing his body far past its limits, because that's what Lieutenant Chen had died for. So these people could live. The crash sent another wave. The humans met them again, and again. Each time, the Deathworlders from the terrible gravity world proved why they had survived their harsh planet. They were stubborn. They didn't know when to quit. They fought like every battle was personal, and most importantly, they meant what they said. No one left behind. Not one single person. Pip sat in a transport finally evacuated, looking back at the station through the viewport. Human ships surrounded it, still fighting, still protecting, still refusing to abandon their mission. "Are all humans like this?" she asked her mother. Her mother, who had spent her whole life hearing about the violent Deathworlders, looked at the human Marine sitting across from them. He was young, exhausted, and covered in minor wounds, but he was smiling at them, making sure they were comfortable. "I think maybe we misunderstood them," her mother said quietly. "I think maybe we've been wrong about what strength really means." The Marine heard her and nodded slightly. "Strength isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting them. That's the Deathworlder way." Outside, the battle raged on. The crash were relentless, but so were the humans. And the humans had something the Kresh didn't. They had a reason to fight that went beyond survival or instinct. They had given their word. And humans kept their promises. The last transport shuttle cleared the station with just hours to spare. 38,000 refugees were safe aboard human vessels. 2,000 more were still being processed through the medical bays, too injured to be moved immediately. Captain Santos stood on her bridge looking at the tactical display. The main Kresh swarm was almost upon them. 500,000 biomechanical nightmares descending like a wave of death. The station was empty now except for her Marines and the final medical cases. The Council fleet was broadcasting urgent messages. Captain Santos, this is Ambassador Vorix of the Galactic Council. You must withdraw immediately. You have evacuated the majority of refugees. Further combat is unnecessary and violates Council law. We demand you cease operations and submit to Council authority. Santos looked at her communications officer. How many people are still on that station? 2,000, Captain. Most critical medical cases. Dr. Park refuses to leave until they're stable. Santos nodded. Then she opened a channel to both the Council fleet and the approaching Kresh swarm. Her voice was cold, harder than anyone had heard before. This is Captain Maria Santos of the United Nations Space Command. To the Galactic Council, I have this to say. We will not abandon 2,000 people because you think it's inconvenient. To the Kresh, I say this. You attacked refugees. Innocent families, children. We don't negotiate with that. We end it. She cut the transmission and looked at her tactical officer. Commander Jackson, prepare the fleet for offensive operations. We're not running from these things. We're going to make sure they never threaten anyone again. The bridge crew was silent for a moment. Then Jackson smiled. Finally, I was getting tired of playing defense. The 12 human warships changed formation. Instead of protecting the station, they moved forward. Directly toward the incoming Kresh swarm, the Council fleet panicked. Captain Santos, this is suicide. You cannot attack that many enemies. Santos didn't respond. She was too busy coordinating the attack. The human fleet hit the Kresh swarm like a spear thrust into a body. They didn't spread out to cover maximum area. They concentrated their fire, punching a hole straight through the enemy formation. Other species fought to survive. Humans fought to win. The Kresh adapted, trying to surround the human ships. But the humans had planned for that. They moved in a constantly shifting pattern, never staying in one place long enough to be pinned down. They fought like a pack of wolves, each ship supporting the others, creating a synergy that was greater than the sum of its parts. On the station, Sergeant Chen and her Marines held the final defensive line. The Kresh had sent boarding parties, trying to get to the medical bay where the injured refugees waited. The Marines met them in the corridors. Pip's mother was in that medical bay, recovering from injuries sustained when the Kresh first attacked. Pip had refused to leave her, and Chen had allowed the child to stay, keeping her close. Now as the fighting intensified, Chen knelt beside Pip. Remember what I told you about humans? Chen asked gently. Pip nodded, trying to be brave. We don't abandon people. Your mother is safe, I promise. But I need you to go with Corporal Davis now. He'll take you to the transport. What about you? Chen smiled. I'm going to make sure nothing gets past this point. That's what I do. Another wave of Kresh broke through. Chen and her team opened fire. The corridor became a killing ground. The humans didn't give a single centimeter. They couldn't. Behind them were people who couldn't fight, couldn't run, couldn't protect themselves. In space, the battle reached a critical point. The Kresh Queen, the intelligence controlling the swarm, realized these humans were different from any species it had encountered. They didn't retreat. They didn't flee. They got angry. The Queen tried to communicate, broadcasting on all frequencies. It offered a truce, a withdrawal, anything to make these terrifying creatures stop. Commander Jackson received the message. He looked at Captain Santos. They're asking for terms, Captain. Santos thought about Lieutenant Chen, who had died saving a transport full of refugees. She thought about the 2,000 people still fighting to survive on the station. She thought about the 40,000 refugees who had spent days in terror, wondering if anyone would save them. No terms, Santos said. No truce. We're ending this threat permanently. Target the hive ship. The human fleet changed course. They had identified the Kresh Queen's vessel, a massive biomechanical construct at the center of the swarm. It was heavily defended, surrounded by thousands of warrior forms. The humans went straight for it. "All ships concentrate fire," Santos ordered. "We're going to punch through their defenses and destroy that hive ship. Once the Queen is dead, the swarm will collapse." It was the kind of insane plan that made sense only to humans. Instead of fighting the entire swarm, they would cut off the head. The human ships took tremendous damage. Shields failed. Armor cracked. One destroyer, the UNSC Defiant, lost main power and began to drift. But before it did, it fired every weapon it had left, clearing a path for the other ships. "Defiant is dead in space," the tactical officer reported. "But they've opened a corridor to the hive ship. All remaining vessels follow me," Santos commanded. "We're finishing this." The human fleet, now down to 10 operational ships, charged through the gap. The Kresh threw everything they had at the humans. But the Deathworlders kept coming. On the station, the final transport was ready. Dr. Park was loading the last patients, working with desperate speed. He had been awake for 37 hours. His hands shook from exhaustion, but they didn't falter. A massive Kresh breakthrough occurred. A dozen of the creatures poured into the medical bay. Dr. Park grabbed a weapon from a fallen Marine. He had never been a soldier. He was a healer, but he stood between his patients and the monsters. "Not one more," he said quietly. "Not one more person dies today." He fired until the weapon was empty. The Kresh kept coming. Park used the gun as a club. He fought with the desperation of a man who had spent hours saving lives and refused to see them taken. Sergeant Chen and her Marines reached the medical bay seconds later. They found Park standing over an unconscious Ventari patient, bleeding from multiple wounds, still holding the enemy off. Chen and her team eliminated the Kresh. Chen caught Park as he collapsed. "Get him on the transport," she ordered. "Everyone out now." "Sergeant, what about you?" one of her Marines asked. "I'm right behind you, go." The Marines hesitated, then obeyed. They carried Park and the last patients to the waiting transport. Pip watched from the ship as Chen made sure everyone was aboard. The transport began to pull away. Chen stood at the airlock watching them go. Then she turned back toward the station interior. "Sergeant Chen, what are you doing?" the pilot called. "Making sure nothing follows you," Chen said. She closed the airlock from the inside. "Tell Pip I kept my promise. Everyone's safe." "Sergeant, that's an order. Get these people to safety." The transport jumped to faster-than-light speed, carrying the last refugees away from the dying station. In space, the human fleet reached the hive ship. They were battered, damaged, running on auxiliary power and pure determination, but they had made it. "All ships full spread," Santos ordered. "Every weapon we have left, fire." The combined firepower of 10 human warships struck the hive ship simultaneously. The biomechanical construct, which had survived battles against entire fleets, cracked under the assault. The Kresh Queen's death scream echoed across all frequencies as her vessel exploded. The effect on the swarm was immediate. Without the Queen's guidance, the Kresh became disorganized, confused. They began to scatter, their coordination broken. "They're retreating," Jackson reported, his voice tired but satisfied. Santos slumped in her command chair. "Good, let them go. We're in no shape to pursue anyway." The battle was over. The refugees were safe. All 40,000 of them. But the cost had been high. The Defiant was lost. Lieutenant Sarah Chen had died saving a transport. Sergeant Chen had sacrificed herself to ensure the final evacuees escaped safely. Dr. Park was in critical condition, his body finally giving out after pushing too far. And yet, as Santos looked at her exhausted crew, she saw satisfaction in their eyes. They had done what they came to do. They had kept their promise. Every single refugee was safe. Not one left behind. The Deathworlders had shown the galaxy what real strength meant. Not the strength to destroy, but the strength to protect. The courage to fight not for conquest, but for justice. The Council fleet maintained its distance, silent now. They had watched everything. They had seen what civilized protocols would have missed. They had seen what happened when you asked for peace and the Deathworlders answered. The human fleet limped toward the nearest safe harbor, a Ventari colony world called Thessia Prime. They moved slowly, damaged ships held together by emergency repairs and the determination of their crews. Behind them, they brought 40,000 refugees who would have otherwise died. Captain Santos stood in her ready room writing letters. One for each crew member who hadn't made it back. Lieutenant Sarah Chen's family. Sergeant Chen's parents, the crew of the Defiant. She wrote them by hand the old way because these people deserved more than a computer-generated message. Dr. Park was in the medical bay, finally resting. He had survived his injuries barely. The ship's doctor said it was a miracle, but the crew knew better. Humans were hard to kill. That's what happened when you evolved on a death world. On the colony world below, preparations were underway to receive the refugees. The Ventari government had never seen anything like this. 40,000 people, all saved by a species the galaxy had dismissed as violent primitives. Station Master Kellis had been among the evacuees. Now he stood at the spaceport watching as the first human ships entered orbit. Pip stood beside him, holding his hand. "Will we get to thank them?" Pip asked. "Yes, little one. We will thank them properly." The landing was simple. No ceremony, no formal reception. Just tired humans in damaged armor, stepping off shuttles and looking around at the world they had saved lives to reach. Captain Santos was the last to disembark. Kellis approached her, trying to find words adequate to express his gratitude. "Captain Santos, we owe you everything. You saved us all." Santos looked uncomfortable with the praise. "We did what anyone should do, Station Master. We responded to a distress call, but the Council follows procedures. We followed our conscience. There's a difference." Kellis wanted to say more, but he was interrupted by a small figure pushing through the crowd. Pip ran straight to Santos and wrapped her arms around the captain's legs. "You kept your promise," Pip said, her voice muffled. "Everyone's safe." Santos knelt down, bringing herself to the child's level, just as Sergeant Chen had done days before. "We did. That's what we do." Sergeant Chen didn't come back. Santos's expression grew sad. "No. She gave her life to make sure you and everyone else made it. She was a hero. Will you tell me about her? About Earth? About why humans are like this?" Santos smiled softly. "I think I can do that. But first I have to go to a very boring meeting with the Galactic Council. They're not happy with us." 3 days later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Captain Santos had been summoned to answer for her actions. The 12 species sat in their designated platforms, looking down at the human captain standing alone in the center of the chamber. Ambassador Vorik spoke first. "Captain Santos, you stand accused of violating Galactic Council protocols, engaging in unauthorized military action, and disregarding direct orders from Council authority. How do you respond?" Santos stood straight, her uniform clean but showing signs of hasty repair. "I respond that I saved 40,000 lives that would have died if we had waited for your protocols." The chamber erupted in angry chatter. Vorix's feathers bristled. "You cannot simply ignore established procedures." "I didn't ignore them," Santos replied calmly. "I prioritized lives over paperwork. There were children on that station, Ambassador. Families. People who had done nothing wrong except exist in the wrong place when the creche attacked. Your fleet of peace would have arrived 3 weeks too late. Everyone would have been dead. That is speculation." "That is fact," Santos interrupted. "The creche arrived exactly when they were projected to arrive. Your fleet arrived exactly when you said it would. Do the math, Ambassador. There's no scenario where your response saves those people." Ambassador Threen, the Qualix, bobbed forward. "But you engaged in aggressive military action. You destroyed the creche hive ship. That goes beyond rescue." Santos's eyes hardened. "The creche attacked refugees. Innocent civilians. They sent boarding parties to murder people in medical bays. Yes, we destroyed their ability to do that again. I won't apologize for that." "Violence is not the answer," Vorix insisted. "Then what is?" Santos asked. "Diplomacy? The creche don't negotiate. Forms, they don't file paperwork. The answer to violence against innocents is strength. Controlled, directed strength used to protect those who cannot protect themselves." She walked forward, closer to the council platforms. "You called us violent. You called us primitives from a death world. You looked down on us because we still know how to fight. But when people needed help, when they were crying out for rescue, who came? Not your fleet of peace, not your diplomats. Us, the violent Deathworlders." Santos pulled up a holographic display. It showed the refugee station, the creche assault, and the human response. "You want to condemn me for saving lives? Go ahead. But explain to the 40,000 Ventari who are alive because we didn't wait for permission that they should have died, so you could maintain your protocols." The chamber was silent now. Every ambassador was watching the display, seeing the battle unfold again. Santos continued, her voice strong. You called for a fleet of peace, we sent one. Just because we came armed doesn't mean we came for war. We came prepared for it. There's a difference. Real peace isn't the absence of violence. It's the presence of safety, of justice, of people willing to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. She turned to face the entire assembly. Our world was hard. It made us strong. But we learned to use that strength to protect others, not dominate them. We learned that the strong have a responsibility to defend the weak. That's what humans believe. That's what we'll always believe. Ambassador Chen of Earth, who had been sitting quietly, stood up. The Council can condemn Earth's actions if you wish, but you should know that humanity will not change our response. The next time someone calls for help, we will answer. We will come armed, prepared, and determined, because that's who we are. The vote was called. The Council would decide whether to sanction Earth for violating their protocols. But something unexpected happened. Ambassador Threen voted against sanctions. So did 3 other species who had been quiet during the debate. They had watched the recordings. They had seen what humans actually did, not what the prejudice against Deathworlders said they would do. The sanctions failed. Voryx was furious. This sets a dangerous precedent. No, Threen said quietly. This sets an honest precedent. The humans showed us that our protocols failed. They failed 40,000 people who would be dead without human intervention. Perhaps it's time we reconsidered what civilization truly means. Word spread across the galaxy. The Deathworlders had saved 40,000 refugees. They had lost ships and lives doing it, and they had done it without hesitation, without asking for payment, without demanding anything in return. Within a month, 17 species requested defense treaties with Earth. Not because humans were peaceful, but because they were effective. Because when they gave their word, they kept it. On Thessia Prime, Pip attended a memorial service. The Ventari had built a monument to those who died saving them. Lieutenant Sarah Chen's name was there. Sergeant Chen's name, the crew of the Defiant, and many others. Captain Santos attended the ceremony. She stood with Pip as the young Ventari placed flowers at the monument. Will humans always come when people need help? Pip asked. Santos thought about her crew, about the damaged ships, about the empty chairs in the Indomitable's mess hall. She thought about the choice her people had made and would make again. Yes, she said simply. When someone calls for help, when innocents are in danger, humans will answer. We might scare you. We might do things differently than you expect, but we'll come. Because you're Deathworlders. Because we're human. And humans protect people. Pip looked up at the monument, reading the inscription the Ventari had placed there. It was simple, but it captured everything. They came when no one else would. They fought when others debated. They saved us all. 6 months later, another distress call echoed across the galaxy. A mining colony under attack. Families trapped. Children in danger. The Galactic Council convened to debate the appropriate response. Forms were filed. Committees were formed. Procedures were followed. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Rodriguez received the same distress call. He didn't form a committee. He didn't file forms. He activated the nearest battle group. Get them moving, he ordered. Someone needs help. The human ships launched immediately, jumping to faster than light speed before the Council had even finished their opening statements. By the time the fleet of peace was authorized to deploy, the human fleet had already arrived. They had evacuated every single colonist. They had eliminated the threat, and they were on their way home. The Council sent another angry message demanding Earth respect their authority. Earth sent back a simple response. Rescue requested. Deathworlders responding. Will always respond. On her ship returning from the successful mission, Captain Santos smiled. Around her, her crew worked with quiet efficiency, already preparing for the next call, the next rescue, the next group of people who needed help, because that's what humans did. They answered when called. They protected those who couldn't protect themselves. They kept their promises. The galaxy had called them violent, primitive, dangerous. They were right. Humans were dangerous, but not to those who needed help. Not to the innocent, not to those crying out for rescue. They were dangerous to those who would harm the helpless, to those who preyed on the weak, to those who thought might made right. The Deathworlders had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Peace wasn't maintained through protocols and committees. It was maintained through strength. The strength to fight when necessary, The courage to risk everything for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The determination to never ever leave anyone behind. And humanity would keep teaching that lesson, one rescue at a time, for as long as there were people who needed help. Because when someone called for peace, when someone begged for rescue, when someone needed a miracle, they didn't need diplomats. They needed heroes. They needed the Deathworlders. And the Deathworlders would always answer.